All right, guys. Today I'm here with Zack Scriven. If you're not familiar with Zack Scriven, I've actually had a pretty good relationship with him for some period of time now, and he's certainly not new to the OT space. He started his career in industrial automation as a very young SCADA engineer, where he quickly became a senior controls engineer by the age of 23. And then he had some different turns in his career where then he turned from engineering to content marketing, where he helped clients like Walker Reynolds transform his integration business into a successful educational business. And that's probably where you know Zach from today in his work with 4.0 Solutions and the strategic marketing that he's been doing there. Today, Zach is a digital transformation coach and a digital media growth manager at 4.0 Solutions, where he plays a key role in educating over 14,000 students at this program, IIoT University. It's a pretty cool program if you haven't checked it out. So, Zach really has a unique blend of technical experience, and he's really dove in on the marketing side of things. And of course, he has a unique look at the whole industry 4.0 landscape. And what I really like about Zach, and I think what we'll explore here today, is not only his technical prowess, but also his business acumen as well, and just how all this can blend together. So, Zach, thanks for joining me on the podcast here. And I'd love to just dive in some topics.
Yeah, of course.
So,
Thanks, Ira. I
yeah.
appreciate the intro.
So, when you look at the idea of digital transformation, uh, in your opinion, what are some of the key things that companies need to really help support them as they move forward in trying to do things?
Yeah. So first, they've got to understand what digital transformation even is, and that's one of the problems. They don't even get the definition. Manufacturers don't even get the definition right, and so they're going about it the wrong way. So they've got to educate themselves, understand the definition of digital transformation, and understand that it's a strategy for transforming the way you operate your business and making data the primary commodity for how you make decisions within your business. Ultimately, working towards getting to the manufacturing holy grail, which is a fully closed loop integrated business where you're using artificial intelligence to analyze your operations, make recommended adjustments, and then your operators are implementing or not implementing those adjustments. Very much like a prompt engineer with ChatGPT, but at a factory level. That's really the fifth industrial revolution, is what we're kind of starting to see.
Okay, okay. And one of the things we really try to do here on the podcast is break down some of these technical topics because there were some big words, maybe small words with AI, but big words used in that explanation there, and really digging into like how do you actually accomplish some of this? And you said that make data the primary commodity, right? And I think this is such a paramount thing that when I look at like CEO reports and these kind of things, you don't always see, hey, I want to make data the primary commodity. It's always the end result. Hey, I want to make things more efficient, or we're going to use AI. But you mentioned it, like data is, as I understand it, kind of step one. How do you go about doing that? Is there things that you really need to consider to is it a thing or is it a philosophy that you're really trying to go about?
Yeah. Yeah. Digital transformation is a strategy, it's not a project. And it's a strategy for transforming the way manufacturers operate their business by leveraging data they generate every day, but never or rarely consume in real time. So the we talk a lot about the foundation, how to actually connect, collect, and store that data. That's where IIoT is. One of the that's why we called it IIoT University, is because we're teaching how to build these industrial Internet of Things ecosystems and architectures, which really helps enable that path to AI.
Gotcha, gotcha. So
Because without the data, you have no AI. With bad data, you have bad AI. That's a quote from Michael Dell, by the way.
well, and it's funny because you hear about ChatGPT and you hear about how great it is, and it is a fantastic tool. But even there, then you also hear instantly about the hallucinations and all these other aspects. And I believe that's a product of a little bit of the model and verifying it, but also the data going into it. And if you're just using all the generic data, you're not actually informing it of local data or things that you have specifically. It can maybe not give you exactly what you need. So in your business, in your process, in your hierarchy, you need to make sure that you have solid information as priority number one, so then you can build on top. So
Most of the manufacturers are spending most of their time just going between different systems to get the data that they need, when your workers really should be solving problems. And that's
right.
where the data architecture and infrastructure comes into play.
So on that point, so that's a good one. So between these different systems, like if manufacturers they arguably have the data, the problem is it's over here, it's over there, it's never exactly where you need it, when you need it, and solving that problem, I know is it is the kind of the holy grail, creating that one space where you can find all the information. What type of person can do this, or how can a company get this done? Does it require you hiring a firm? Are you going out to hire a McKinsey? How does this work to kind of pull this data together?
Yeah. So if a company comes to you and says that they'll digitally transform you, and then they give you a fixed price to do that over a certain number of years, you should probably run. It's more of an iterative process, and it starts at the edge, like with the factory floor employees. We say all the time that those are the smartest employees in your organization because they know all of the problems in your business. They're the ones actually producing and operating the machines and the equipment. So that's where we take more of an education approach, educate those people, turn them into smart, employees of the future, where they're empowered to make those data-driven decisions. They know what the digital company's digital strategy is, so they're always making decisions, whether it be through some implementation or some expansion. They're making those decisions through the framework of the digital strategy, so they're all going in the same direction. So it starts with education, empowering that factory floor worker to become a citizen developer, to connect, collect, store all new equipment, and then visualize, analyze, and then integrate with machine learning and AI, like giving your
Got
factory floor that. So that's kind of the approach that we take versus, hey, bring in a consultancy. I mean, you don't even know what you don't know yet, so that's why you kind of have to do an iterative approach versus trying to do it all at once.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. And I know everybody, of course, wants the end product. Like, people don't buy hammers because they want a hammer. They buy a hammer because they want a hammer and a nail and get a project done. And that's the general psyche of just the way we operate. So it is nice to kind of look at that perfect box of, hey, we can digitally transform you. But the fact of the matter is likely doesn't exist, and it is an iterative process. So it sounds like you got to get your data, you got to normalize your data, and then you got to really look at your factory line workers, because that's where you're going to have the most meaningful change, and they have the most information about your system or process and how things can change. And empowering them to actually do that is paramount. And pulling all those different systems together, I'm assuming like through the program, like the IIoT University, um, I know there's an extensive community there, not only in the program, but there's the Discord and there's communication. And it just seems like there's so much value that can come from that, because it's Reddit, but like the good side of Reddit, where you can actually get solid information about maybe a problem or a philosophy or a challenge you may be facing, whether it be technical or even sometimes political and organizationally, right? Is this some of the things you're facing or working with the community?
Yeah, and this is one of the problems that I faced early on, before the results were undeniable in the strategy and approach that we were taking with 4.0 solutions and building IIoT University, creating an education company. Before that, we were started out as just marketing a service-based business. So a lot of these clients, or who are today our clients, were competitors back then. And so, from some people's perspectives, we were teaching other integrators, the secret sauce, right? Many people wouldn't have done that. They would have just tried to monetize it themselves. But through the power of community, we were able to scale the impact, and with the right business model, we were able to, um, create a business create a business model that actually was able to sustain it, create a self-sustaining company without needing to rely on the resources from it, the integration firm. So then we didn't have conflicting interests, and so it became much more cooperative and beneficial once we kind of spun it off into its own company. I hope that makes sense, but yeah,
Eh,
that was one of the biggest problems. Was like, hey, like, why are we doing this? And But then once 4.0 solutions started driving all the content, and that's where the manufacturers started coming to us and saying, "Hey, we have that problem too." And then we would pass them off to all the integrators in our community, not just Intellic, but GIS. There's a handful of partner integrators that we work with, Ectobox. Where does Amy? Oh, Skellig. They do life science. Yeah, there's the scores of integrators that, like, we kind of connect. We're kind of the broker, and we connect them to the right. We connect the projects and the end users to the right integrators. And that was kind of always the vision for 4.0 solutions, was try to find the best hardware, the best software, and the best resources and integrators for Industry 4.
Yeah, and this is what I think is so fascinating about what you've been able to accomplish with 4.0 solutions, Zach. But also just you. I mean, so I look back and think about, okay, I know you worked for an integrator, you were very successful there, you worked on different projects, and then you took a heavy look at social influencing, particularly in LinkedIn. And then it really looked like you combined those types of things and saying, well, hey, there is these technical challenges and we can communicate. Engineers do live on these platforms. And oh yeah, providing education is a great way to build community to help things out and move industries forward, move topics forward. And by proxy, then you build a solid brand, right? And that's what you did, through your LinkedIn experience, and then with 4.0 Solutions, I believe, and then you've even more recently gone off and tried your hand at some other businesses. I know you dove into an EV mobile detailing company. I don't know if you want to share anything on that, but I just thought that was a fascinating left turn, and it was something that, someone that had known you, maybe it wasn't something that was completely expected, but it was great, and I'm sure you were able to take away some great things along the way. Share some
Yeah.
experiences with that.
Well, I was bit by the entrepreneurial bug, like the stuff we were doing. 4.0 Solutions was essentially a startup in 2020, after COVID. And, the very first mastermind, that we did where we trained students was technically what we were still under Intellic integration. So right around that time, we had to pivot. We started with $0. So we had to self fund from day one. And then that spun up to like 2022 to where it was almost pretty much self sustaining, right? Like, once I stepped and I was like, hey, you know what? I'm got a lot of free time on my hands. Let me see if I can start something up, take my own stab at my own business. And so I bought a Tesla. And so I was like, hey, how could I turn this into a brand or into a business? And so I had the idea of creating an EV detailing business where, it's like for EV owners, by EV owners. And that concept kind of really took off. And, so I went and pursued that business over the last, about 6 months ago. It was like where it was 2 years. I pursued that full time for 2 years. And ultimately, what I did learn was that, again, I love entrepreneurship, but it was something I tried to do by myself. And that's kind of where humility kicks in. And it's like, hey, I kind of have some struggle doing certain executive functioning tasks by myself. So while I'm great on a partnership, like, what I did with Walker and Vaughn, or kind of working on a team like what we have now at 4.0 Solutions, we have a little bit bigger of a team. Um, I'm I'm not like it's really hard for me to run my own company. So I was telling you before we went live, I had just enough success to keep the business going, but not enough to where I was able to kind of create it into its own self-sustaining business. So it was kind of more of a self-employment, and it was good at that. There was months where we brought in 15, 16, $17,000, me and my girlfriend, just out there detailing and polishing cars. So it was a pretty good self-employment income, but again, not really what I had envisioned. And so and during that time, the 4.0 community just continued to blow up. Unified namespace, everyone started talking about it, like even third degree connections. So people who didn't even hear about it directly from us. And I was still involved with 4.0 kind of during that time. I had a couple guest appearances on podcasts. So I was like, hey, I just need to come back onto the team and double down on, what they've continued to, build while I was working on my own thing. So
Yeah. And I think this is a great story, and I guess I'm curious before I go too far down this rabbit hole. Uh, Knowing what you know now at the end of this, would you still do the EV mobile detailing company?
God, that's a fucking great question. So yeah, all right. So I this is one thing that I learned. I I think I'm pretty incapable. This sounds so limiting, right? But this is, I said, humility, right? So I'm not incapable of running a business, but I'm unable to do it by myself. And I think some of that executive functioning and lack of prioritization comes from my neurodiversity. So in some sense, my neurodiversity gives me strengths in creative marketing or abstract thinking, cross pollination between engineering and marketing ideas. That's what I'm great at. But that's not a great person to run a company where you need to build systems and processes. I'm horrible at hiring people. Like, I struggle at building teams. And that's kind of really where I encountered that, like, over and over and over again. And so eventually I was like, hey, when am I going to, kind of not accept defeat, but pivot, right? So I
Right.
still have the business. I can still pick it up, and I kind of looked for a partner for a period of time, and maybe that's an avenue in the future. But for right now, it's, we've got the Prove It conference coming up next year with 4.0. Walker selling his integration business, doubling down on 4.0 in the Prove It conference. Um, I mean, 4.0 solutions is as strong as it's ever been. So that's exciting. I'm leading a cohort of 190 students going through our flagship training program right now, the Mastermind 16-week accelerator program. So that's really exciting. And students are getting feedback, and it's really awesome to be like, hey, we're just a few steps ahead of where they're at. And so we're just kind of able to help guide them along that way and connect them to the right
Right.
resources.
So it's really cool that you shared what you did and really what you've learned. So I don't know if you directly answered the question, but you know, I would say from what I just heard from you though, you learned and took away so much from that effort
Oh
of
yeah.
trying
So
to
would
build the
I do it
business.
again? Yeah, I
Yeah.
would have had to. I would have had to do it again because I didn't know that for certain. I thought I could start
Right.
it by myself because
Yeah.
I tried to do it, right? So
Hmm.
now I would not necessarily try to start it by myself. If I had a partner, if it was like, hey, Ira, let's go start this business,
Yep.
then I'd be like, yeah, let's do that. But probably by myself, I probably wouldn't do it again.
Yeah.
Knowing what I know now.
Right. And I think that's so important because tying this whole thing together, right? So I think about the need in the market. There is a massive need for digital transformation. It's this philosophy, it's a monumental shift. It all starts with data as the commodity. You got to collect the data, you got to utilize the data. To make that happen, you need integrators. There's a bunch of different people out there, or you need people to be able to architect those systems together. There's people that will do that today. They're maybe not the biggest firms out there, so maybe they're smaller firms. Maybe it's someone at a company today that's thinking about trying to step out on their own, being that entrepreneurial type of person. And while it may not be the EV company that you started, it still comes with its own challenges, managing, hiring, dealing with contracts, as well as the technical expertise. So I think your experience that you shared of going off in this turn towards the EV market and trying your hand at it, really pushing it, and doing the marketing, doing the actual work, doing the hiring, getting the clients, on and on and on. That's the same thing that maybe somebody would want to do or have to do if they were trying to break further into the 4.0 game and maybe offering some service, consulting, integration, whatever it may be. Maybe even some of the students that you have in your cohort. So that's the interesting thing that I've always seen with all of this, Zach, and kind of like your full rounded type of solution. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast was not just to talk about the technical details. Yes, we know that. Yes, and I know we can find so much more information from you and Walker and the 4.0 team. But there's this other piece that sometimes gets lost in the weeds when people do get bit by that entrepreneurial bug of just understanding that maybe you don't know what you don't know. And I would argue it's okay to ask for help. Look for partners.
Yeah.
Look for someone to help you out.
This is the perfect plug and transition because before I made the decision to kind of come back to 4.0 full time, I knew that was going to be my priority at that point, right? If I didn't do that, what I would have done in my own business is I would have joined a detailing mastermind. I would have joined a cohort, a group of other detailers running their businesses, and I would have asked them, I need help hiring. Like, give me the systems, give me the playbook, and then join the calls week after week to give them updates, to hold myself accountable, to actually build my detailing business. Because that's what my thought was like. If I'm going to have a success at building any type of a business, I would think a detailing business is a pretty straightforward, simple enough business where it's not like engineering, where a lot of the mental effort goes into the workload itself. Although, detailing can be very labor intensive. The primary work for the detailing business was on the like creating the business structure itself. So I was like, that's kind of what I was trying to do there. But um, I would have joined the detailing mastermind.
Yeah.
So and that's kind of where I ultimately what I wanted to do is I wanted to have my own detailing mastermind because I knew how to do that. I knew how to
Do
do the
that. Yeah.
marketing. I know how to, but I didn't actually have the skill set to be the coach, to be the leader of a detailing mastermind, because I would have had to been the person who did that myself, right? So I would have been a fraud, basically. And there's a lot of people out there that are trying to do that right now, and they just need to be honest with themselves and be like, look, I'm not that guy to lead a detailing mastermind. Matter of fact, I probably should be in one. I'm the student right now, you
Right.
know?
Yeah, and I know you've used a couple of strong words, fraud you just used, and then earlier on, really talking about where you're not great and things. I understand where you're coming from. It's coming from a good place, but like I think you're better at those than you give yourself credit for. But I think the point is that
Yeah.
you know that there's a gap between what you're really good at and what that is, and you need to fill that gap to really excel. So I just don't want you to beat yourself too much up,
No,
Zach.
thank you, thank you. No, and I wasn't necessarily a fraud. Like, obviously the marketing aspect I knew, the brand building, but like there was certain big gaps within like kind of building a traditional detailing business that I lacked.
Yeah.
But believe me, like I started, and maybe there's a scenario where I just went straight into coaching and I just faked it until I maked it, and then I brought in coaches who knew how to do that kind of stuff, and then but I was selling people on my coaching, but then I was like, oh shit, I'm still trying to build my own detailing business. And so I scaled. I was literally collecting people's money for the coach. I ended up refunding them, but because I couldn't fulfill the promise.
Mhm.
But I was like, oh shit. I was like this close away from like a $20,000 a month detailing coaching business. And I
Wow.
was like, fucking stoked. But then I was like, wait. Maybe I got the cart before the horse here, you know?
Yeah. Well, sometimes it's good to take that pause. Um, well, hey, Zach, this has been a great conversation, and I love the dialogue here. I do have a final question for you. So, we started off talking about your experience as an integrator. Then you dove into this social media aspects, and then you helped build this 4.0 solutions in the mastermind program, IoT University. You did this whole detailing project where you've learned quite a bit to the point now where you're back and it's things like sound like are growing better than ever. In the world of digital transformation, if someone was trying to break into this, and not necessarily as a customer trying to use it, but someone that is looking to maybe branch off to what they're doing today to be on more entrepreneurial, what advice could you give them? Is it join IoT University? Is it I don't know. What are those things? What are your
Yeah.
kind of takeaways?
Yeah, I mean, if you were building a product or a solution or a business for 4.0, then obviously I would say that's probably not a bad investment. But just in general, I would say become a full stack entrepreneur.
Full
So
stack.
you need to be just like in engineering, you have full stack engineer, you've got back end, you've got code, you got front end. Um, be a full stack entrepreneur. So product, marketing, sales.
So
And
soup to nuts. You got to know it all. You got to be
yeah,
that guy. You got to go out there. You got to get the clients. You got to get the clients in. You got to understand what they need. You got to develop what they need, and then bring it on home. Do the accounts payable and all the other aspects.
yeah, because sales is really the lifeblood of the business, and that's what even gave me the ability to even start my own company in the first place.
Right.
Was I had done more so freelancing. I had my own media company, but it wasn't like, I mean, I only had like a handful of clients, right? So that's much different than my detailing company where we were servicing like 30, 40, 50 clients a month,
Right.
and all, so the sales cycle was a lot shorter. But some of the tickets that I sold, a $6,000 RV ceramic coating, right? So
Wow.
I had to be able to sell high ticket services, $800, $1,200 packages. Um, I learned how to sell high ticket, at 4.0 solutions just out of necessity. It's like, hey, I need to know how to sell these, more expensive programs over the phone. I came from engineering, and then I learned marketing, and then I learned sales. So being able to have fluency at all of the full entrepreneurial stack is probably my best advice for someone that's looking to go out there on their own, and to not underestimate any of the three categories.
Good. Well, thank you. Thank you for that advice. And in this podcast, looking at tomorrow's trends, I do see this as a big trend. The idea of this is the way business is going. There's lots of businesses that need help with digital transformation day in and day out. So investing time, investing effort, wherever you may be in that stack today, augmenting where you are to try to get the other tools sounds like a pretty good path forward. So with that, Zach, I want to thank you for your time. Are there any final thoughts or anything else that you want to say as we close off?
Oh, no, that's it. Thanks so much, Ira. And look forward to catching a future podcast episode.
All right. Thanks a lot, Zach.